is revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast today. It is October 22nd, Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. All right, so last night we had episode 125 of Tuesdays with Perry. And we discussed a bunch of things, including Robert De Niro making a fool of himself once again. We discussed the No Kings protest. We discussed Gaza. We discussed quite a few different subjects, so I implore you to go check that out. We also discussed Kami Mandami, who is or is going to be the new mayor of New York City. It's hard to believe that he won't be, but we're going to talk about that as well a little bit today. But what we're really going to talk about today is the fact that John Brennan, the former director of the CIA, who had his security clearance stripped, is going to be referred to the DOJ for prosecution, and hopefully he's going to be indicted. It's kind of hard to say really exactly what's going to become of this. So basically the crux of the case is that he lied to Congress. And usually when you lie to Congress, usually get a slap on the wrist. But I think a lot of people that were going up against Trump are now going to be prosecuted for this because what they lied about really was their participation in the conspiracy to undermine Trump's candidacy and then his presidency during the first term. So hopefully that change I just made worked out okay. Like I said, I'm juggling a bunch of stuff. I won't have to juggle soon. I invested in some new technology, which is going to make this podcast much better. I don't know what's going on with my laptop today because I cleared everything off. It was running great, and all of a sudden today, this morning, it's running like shit. I don't know. I don't know what happens. There's nothing running except for just a couple applications. So we're going to talk about this. Or hopefully we're not going to talk about this technical difficulties I keep having. It's getting quite ridiculous. That's why I had to invest in some new equipment, because just trying to do this from the very beginning, I was eking out all the juice, squeezing out all the juice I could of my old technology, and it really wasn't made for what I'm using it for. So that's part of the problem. But I could see that the video is already hanging up. There's no reason why. I checked many times what is happening here. So we're going to get on to our first headline, though, for the day. Everything is just, all my apps are just like freaking out. They're blinking on and off and what have you. Let's get into the news. Let's read the news for today. October 22nd, Wednesday. We're going to start out with Fox. House Judiciary Committee refers former CIA Director John Brennan to the Justice Department for prosecution. Representative Jim Jordan, who's heading up the Oversight Committee, alleges former CIA director lied in the 2023 testimony about the agency's use of the Steele dossier. Now, 2023 was not that long ago. But let's be clear. This was a conspiracy with the intelligence agencies and other establishment figures the deep state to keep Trump out of office. Why? Because Trump is popular and successful. And he wanted to basically undo the conduits of power, the deep state, drain the swamp, so to speak. And this is one of the ways you certainly go about doing it is to go after some of these people who were engaged in serious, I think, crimes and malfeasance. But also news today, a man arrested after driving his car into security gate outside the White House, say authorities. This is from the New York Post. And from the Daily Mail, man plows into security gate outside the White House, causing lockdown. An area surrounding the White House was put under lockdown on Tuesday night after a driver plowed into the security gate. The unidentified driver rammed the barricades at the intersection of 17th and East Street around 10:30 p.m. before he was immediately arrested by officers from the Secret Service Uniform Division. So we look at this story and the New York Post, and basically what we have here is no information. So we don't know what precipitated this incident. We don't know if indeed the incident is real. They arrested somebody and they're not releasing his name. So we don't have anything to go by. I seriously am skeptical of all these types of incidents since the case of Miriam Carey, where Miriam Carey, she was a Connecticut woman, Stanford resident, who took her infant child, drove all the way from Connecticut to Washington, D.C., and rammed the security gate, much as this guy did, at the White House, and then led Secret Service and Capitol Police on a high-speed chase, really in a small area, but traveling at high rates of speed, executing driving maneuvers that you would only see on an action flick or from a stunt driver. So, of course, it led me to believe that this was a staged incident. Not that Miriam Carey wasn't in the car, but it was at the same time where remote controlling vehicles, overtaking vehicles via remote control, or hacking was recently in the news. But we had also other events that seemed to be staged at the White House gate. So, I'm waiting to see what information we get out of this and whether or not this was a stage event or if it's another crazed liberal who wants to take revenge on a president for fantasized illegality. We also recently discovered a sniper's perch outside Florida airport where Air Force One lands with a clear line of sight to where Trump would exit the plane. I want to get into this other article from the Associated Press. Anti-science bills hit state houses, stripping away public health protections built over a century. This article is from the Associated Press, but it's not anti-science. If anything, it is science, but they don't want to admit it. And what are they talking about here? More than 420 anti-science bills attacking, see how they use the verbiage there? Long-standing public health protections, vaccines. Well, vaccines deserve a closer look, for certain. Vaccine technology, vaccine approval needs more scrutiny. Milk safety, do you know what this is? Okay, so people want to drink raw milk. and the government won't let them drink raw milk. And raw milk producers like the Amish are being targeted by the FDA and other government agencies. At least they were under the Biden administration. And they mentioned fluoride. Fluoride. So we all know what the deal with fluoride is, right? It's one of the bad halogens like bromide, etc. And it is blamed for, among other things, calcifying the pineal gland, which makes you, or it causes the inability for you to connect spiritually with things, with God. Also, I have my own theories about fluoride and fluorescent lighting, but I'm not going to get into that now. The lead goes on to say these anti-science, dubbed by the Associated Press, have been introduced in state houses across the U.S. this year, part of an organized, politically savvy campaign to enshrine a conspiracy-driven agenda into law. It's not a conspiracy-driven agenda. It is fact. Now, let's take another look at laws that are trying to be passed in state houses across the country, one of which is not allowing chemtrails to be deployed in the airspace above certain states. It's interesting to note that states do have sovereign airspace, but in any case, this isn't anti-science. They say they're not spraying things into the air to affect weather. That's exactly what they're doing. There's no other way about it. Now, whether you think chemtrails are being sprayed over your population to somehow, I don't know, drive you crazy or make you sick, that's a little less plausible than weather modification, which is happening in every area of the country and has been since the mid-70s. It's about the same time they fucked up the ozone with other weather experiments. And then, of course, they blame fossil fuels and other things. So, speaking of anti-science, let's get into this article from Unheard. Trans identification decline points to social contagion. Now, this is something we already knew. So we heard about the first study already, but Unheard points out here, what should we make of these sharp spikes and then declines? They support the idea of a social contagion, which was brought up early in the ascension of trans identity. It was first proposed in 2017, the idea that trans identification was spreading through the culture, not occurring naturally, organically, etc. Young people were not only reared in a culture that acknowledged trans identity, they were raised in a culture that both celebrated it and institutionalized it. Indeed, they nurtured it. First, they ask you to accept it. Then they ask you to support it. And then they ask you to promote it. And that's when I believe they just crossed the line there. And before I get into the next article, I thought I had They were taught in schools, the article goes on to say, that embodying stereotypes associated with a girl made you a girl, even if you had a body of a boy, that you were taught that to be masculine was somehow harmful, etc. There was another article I had, I think I got rid of it because it talked about the same thing. And I had a page from this talking about the two different studies. I just want to check to see if I still have that article. I might have trashed it. Yeah. But Unheard did cite the two studies. The one recently in England, and then there was another one more recently in San Diego. And I think I got rid of that text that identified this trend. Yeah, I got rid of it. So there's been a second study. Is the whole point of this article here. There's a second study from the University of San Diego, which outlines the same thing. That although I believe some people are poisoned hormonally to the point where they might think they're the opposite sex, a lot of it also had to do with a social contagion or otherwise adopting things that was seen as rebellious as a way to gain status among your peers. Next story up is from Reuters. Demolition crews tear down White House's East Wing for Trump's ballroom project. Although this isn't real news because there have been a lot of presidents who do renovations on the White House. As we said last night on Tuesdays with Perry, if anybody is certainly able to and accomplished enough to take on such a project, it would be Trump. Something like this is very suitable for Trump, for sure. He is certainly qualified to do renovations and to build things. He's a builder. But the funny thing here is Hillary Clinton mocked online after blasting Trump's White House ballroom construction. That Clinton would never defile the White House, she says, but we all know that the Clintons took $28,000 in furnishings from the White House that belonged to the White House's permanent collection. And they also took hundreds of thousands of dollars in flatware when Bill left office in 2001. All these people do is lie. And the thing is, only in places like the New York Post would point this out, or other conservative websites, or on X, what have you. If you've ever watched liberal media, they don't acknowledge anything. They just lie, and then even if their lie is found out, they don't correct, or if they do correct, they do it in such a way that people don't notice. If you watch liberal media, you have no idea what's going on. When you see ICE and the protests and stuff, you don't see the same footage that we see. It's complete propaganda. They should show when I worked in news, we always lobbied for imagery that accurately portrayed what was happening on the ground. So you have people walking around Portland and going, look, it's not a war zone. But if you go at night around the ICE facility, you're going to get a completely different picture. All right, let's get into immigration. First, there's this story from Ireland. This is from Zero Hedge. Riot erupts at Irish migrant hotel after 10-year-old allegedly sexually assaulted. The latest of so many sexual assaults perpetrated by migrants throughout Europe. They just have a different perspective. Any unattended woman or even girl is subject to sexual assault. According to local media, a 26-year-old migrant was charged with sexually assaulting a 10-year-old girl on the hotel grounds between 11 p.m. Sunday and 1:30 a.m. Monday. Reportedly, the girl had been in state care after her family struggled with her behavioral problems, but she'd given the slip to her minders, her state minders, mind you. I don't know, did she give the slip to her state minders? Or did her state minors deliver her to the hotel? So, but her minders were on a recreational trip to downtown Dublin, and somehow she ended up at the migrant hotel where she was sexually assaulted. Sick. And that's what I mean. When you don't know who you're bringing into your country, you don't know what kind of background they have. And like I mentioned previously, is that a lot of these folks, most of them are economic migrants that are searching for a better life for them and their families. I understand that. But a lot of them are escaping prosecution for crimes they committed. Or they've been convicted of crimes and they have that stigma attached to them now. So they can't get jobs and they're shunned by people in their community and stuff. So they want to go to greener pastures where A, they could sexually assault more children, and like in a free democracy or in a big city, you could fly under the radar, and because there's so many people, no one really knows if you're a sexual deviant or not. So there were ICE raids in New York City. ICE agents make busts on Canal Street in New York City's Chinatown in an effort to crack down on illegal vendors. This is a little erroneous because if you've ever been to New York City, you've ever been to Canal Street, all the illegal vendors there are also illegal immigrants. So that's not surprising. So were they cracking down on illegal vending, or are they cracking down on illegal immigrants? I think it's the latter. Federal immigration authorities arrested multiple people, including illegal vendors, illegal immigrants, and enraged protesters on Tuesday afternoon in the targeted operation on Canal Street in Manhattan's Chinatown. ICE agents descended on the block between Lafayette and Center Streets, which typically crowded with merchants selling knockoff designer bags and other cheap items around 4 p.m. And they get paid per bag they sell. They get a small thing. They don't get paid much. But most of these folks can't really even speak English and are usually in the country illegally, illegal residents. So they weren't cracking down on the vending. They're cracking down on these people because most of these people are illegal immigrants and they're hired by the Chinese to sell all these knockoffs that come out of China, mostly. And then the vendors tried to flee. They tried to run. And then, the agents tackled them and stuff. And then everybody got all their panties in a bunch because federal law enforcement was performing their lawful duty. I don't care if you don't agree with the law. That doesn't give you the right to obstruct law enforcement, certainly, and or resist arrest, whatever. You see this all the time. And if you respond with force, that gives the law enforcement the right to use force. Like I said the other day, the best thing is to do is yes, sir, no, sir. If you have rights, those rights, if they're violated, will be brought up in court. Post-millennial anti-ICE nonprofit moves into offices across the street from Portland ICE facility with help from the city. The Portland Immigrant Rights Coalition, a taxpayer-funded non-governmental organization, provides guidance to illegal immigrants on the best practices to evade apprehension by federal authorities, and also they will shelter illegal immigrants and others and protesters that are on the scene there outside the ICE facility. And so now they moved across the street, which gives them the ability not just to protect illegal immigrants, but also protect other people who are violating the law and seek to evade arrest. Also from the post-millennial, ICE arrests 51 criminal illegal immigrants in Portland amid ongoing Antifa-linked protests. The operation targeted illegal migrants with extensive criminal histories such as sexual assault, child abuse, like what we saw in Dublin, domestic violence, drug trafficking, and manslaughter. To me, it doesn't matter. And I'm not like Joe Rogan. I don't care if you've been here 20 years. If you're in the country illegally and ICE comes across you and you can't prove legal residency, then you're deported. Joe Rogan was like, well, they should have some sort of, I'm not saying that they shouldn't. The problem is Joe Biden let in too many. We got to get them all out. And if some long-standing residents, illegal residents, are scooped up, I'm sorry. It's the same thing with the wall. Now, you want to get a majority, especially the bad hombres, out of the country, build a wall, strengthen border security, and then we can talk about amnesty. But until this work is done, we can't. The article goes on to say the Trump administration has agreed. Oh, this is a wrong text. Sorry. If you didn't know, where is this article? Oh, the Trump administration is being forced to forgive student loans. I'm going to get in that article in just a second, but that's another thing that just gets my goat. So then we'll move on to Robert De Niro. Perry and I talked about this yesterday, and I talked about it previously as well. The Federalist. Robert De Niro is one of the worst old men in America today. Now, we sort of talked about this at length yesterday, last night on episode 126 of Tuesdays with Perry. But I need to, and I went over it previously. And my problem, as I mentioned last night, with Robert De Niro is that he's talking shit. So I'm going to go over a couple of things he said, but one of the most that the Federalist didn't even bring up is Trump is not going to leave office. And he kept going, no, he's not. I know he's not. I know he's not going to leave office. But he said the same thing back in 2019. And Trump left office without any issue. You had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying Trump wasn't going to leave office. He left office. So you have Robert De Niro saying the same thing. They're used to seeing, and then he talks about the media. They're used to seeing Trump do his stuff, and they talk and they listen. And that's the truth to them because they don't listen to anything else. Somewhere way out there in the Midwest, way out there in the Midwest somewhere, out west in certain places, rural places, that's the truth because he's Trump, because he gets more airtime. I don't even know what that means. Somewhere in the Midwest. So Robert De Niro and his deluded thinking, and they're all deluded fantasies of left-wing nut jobs. He thinks that the mainstream media in the Midwest somehow favors Trump and tells them things that with the East Coast media doesn't say. That's just not true. And the Federalist points it out. They said in the first 100 days of his second term, the three major broadcast news channels pounded Trump and his administration with 92% negative coverage. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He just talks shit. Why would you listen? I don't care if somebody's a movie star or reality star. I don't care. People talk shit all the time. So they don't read. And because you watch things on the internet, that doesn't mean it's real. If you don't read it, and it's not sourced, then what the fuck? You're just talking shit. You're talking about things you believe, not what you know. And then you could digress into the philosophy of what actually knowing is, but we're not going to do that here. But this happens with my liberal brother all the time. I tell him things that are fact, and he goes, that's what you believe. It's a postmodern doctrine like there is no knowing. Because you hear things that you ascribe as facts, but you just believe something. It's just, they're really in a fantasy land. They don't believe in objective reason, rationale, or facts. Story goes on to say, this is De Niro, I wish you can't do this in some ways. If the news media could find ways to kind of ignore or tamp down nonsense from Trump, it's just total nonsense, he says. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. It's not nonsense. These are real policy objectives that certainly Trump, the conservatives are trying to reach, obtain. And I don't know what he's talking about. What Robert De Niro is talking about is total nonsense. Not Trump. Trump is talking about real, concrete policy objectives that the United States would benefit from obtaining. I don't know. He's just, the problem is that sort of like Howard Stern, but I think Howard Stern reads. If you know anything about Robert De Niro, apparently he's a recluse. And he doesn't read. He doesn't do anything. Apparently he looks at stuff that's sent to him on his phone. And that's not an accurate way to gain factual knowledge about things. You need to read. And hopefully the news sources you read are sourced. And some television media does this also. They will say, according to Reuters or the White House press secretary or so-and-so said this, that, the other thing, or they heard Trump say it himself, whatever. That's sourced. As soon as people say, people familiar with the matter say, that's not a source. That's unsourced. That's on the condition of anonymity. And I guess you could report that, but that should be taken with a grain of salt, because realistically, people can make shit up and say, it's an anonymous source told me. Yeah. Who's the anonymous source? James Comey? I mean, which brings us down to the crux of the matter politically these days is the shutdown. And PJ Media has a headline, wait, a majority of Americans want the government shutdown to continue? Yes. I am one. I am one that wants the shutdown to continue. I think certainly that the troops should be paid, but otherwise I don't care. I don't care if government employees get furloughed. I don't care if the national parks are closed, especially this time of year. And the U.S. federal government is bloated. The idea that obviously Charlie Kirk and other conservatives have, and that the founders had, was that the national government should be small and concentrated on the responsibilities of the federal government, which are security, so border security and military security, And there was one other thing. Is there another thing? I don't know if there's another thing. Yeah, so what else does the federal government need to do besides collect taxes? Well, I mean, realistically, I believe in a social safety net, a national social safety net, but the responsibilities of the federal government are small and they grew over time. Especially after they instituted the income tax, because then it was just a way to raise money. You increase the velocity of money, and then everybody has their hand in the stream, and it's just, you get more fraud, you get grift, graft, etc. So we talked a little bit about this last night. This is just the news. Trump administration seeks Supreme Court ruling to toss stay in National Guard case. As I mentioned, we talked about this last night, and one stay was removed, I think in Portland or in Oregon. And we'll see what happens in Illinois. We know the stays, that's why they issued a stay, because they can't rule it as unconstitutional, because the executive has the right to deploy troops. Guard. It's actually National Guard. When people say, I don't like to see troops on the streets of America, they're actually guardsmen. They're not considered troops unless they're deployed outside of the country. Because the rules of engagement are completely different. If guardsmen are deployed outside the country, like to fight in Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever, they're considered troops. They're used as troops. But they are guardsmen if deployed within the United States. So hopefully the Supreme Court will rule in his favor. I imagine they will. I mean, Trump wins. You know, he has a team of lawyers deciding what's legal, what's not legal, and what is in a gray area. Fox News, number of young adults identified. Here is the other transgender thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. I thought, I knew I had another article and I didn't put them together. So new research from San Diego State professor analyzes national representative surveys showing a sharp decline in transgenderism. Here's the information I was looking for. Jean Twenge, a professor of psychology at San Diego State University, has identified additional data that appears to confirm these findings on a wider scale, and it's referring to the findings by Eric Kaufman, who's actually an American, but who's a professor of politics at the University of Buckingham in England, showing that a share of college students identify as anything other than male or female has been cut in half in just 2 years. Twenge analyzed the data from the nationally representative Household Pulse Survey, which asked people directly about identifying as transgender. And then she put her findings in an article by Generation Tech. Juggling applications here, so bear with me. Thanks for joining me today. Please engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Appreciate it. Shout out to the people that have been participating in the live chat, since we're going live on multiple platforms. Please chat in any questions or any comments or any information you might have, because it's all about crowdsourcing. The more heads you have to put together, the smarter you can become. Next headline from the post-millennial: Trump administration agrees to cancel student loan debt for up to 2.5 million borrowers. So the issue here had become that the Trump administration was trying to cancel what Biden had started, which was loan forgiveness for college borrowers. However, the AFT sued the Trump administration in March of 2025, just shortly after he took office, after President Trump had reversed Biden-era student loan forgiveness policies and issued an order to halt the IDR enrollment processing. So the IDR is income-driven repayment programs. What does this mean? That means, so basically what happened was the people that took out student loans and never got a job, if it was through the IDR, then they don't have to pay any money back because they're not making money. So as part of the student loan forgiveness, I found the whole thing unconstitutional, how the president just decided with AutoPen that people don't have to pay back loans that were guaranteed to them. It's the whole reason you have the guaranteed student loan thing is because it's unforgivable. So apparently it's going to forgive balances after 20 to 25 years of qualifying payments. The agreement filed on October 17th in federal court as part of the ongoing case of the American Federation of Teachers, why teachers are trying to get deadbeats, get their loans forgiven, I don't know, versus the U.S. Department of Education, which won't be around much longer anyway, that reinstates Biden administration loan cancellations for borrowers enrolled in specific IDR plans. As I mentioned before, it qualifies you and how much money you're making and whether or not you can repay. So they're basically saying, well, they don't have any money, so they can't repay, so forgive the whole thing. Also including income contingent repayment, pay as you earn, and income-based repayment. It's all the same thing. It's, oh, if you can't pay, you don't have to pay. I had a student loan. I repaid the whole friggin' thing. And the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers Union, filed the suit after Trump was trying to undo all the insane shit, unconstitutional shit that Biden was doing. And the reason it gives you ire, and many people have this, many parents, I helped my kid repay her student loan. I invested tens of thousands of dollars paying off the last bit of my kid's student loan. And now I hear that if she just went into default, that her loan would have been forgiven. So parents were complaining that they spent tens of thousands of dollars on their kids' education when actually they didn't have to. Again, this is bad for the American economy in general, but for the balance sheet of the United States federal government. Little China news from PJ Media. China is making a big move in our own backyard, but no one is talking about it. Well, we'll talk about it. What exactly are they talking about? The fact that how much land China controls in Nicaragua is the issue. As of October 7th, that number is around 1.5 million acres, give or take. Some sources say it's actually much, much higher. To put that in perspective, it's roughly the size of the state of Delaware. Chinese land ownership in the U.S. peaked around almost 400,000 acres in 2021. It all started in 2021 when Nicaragua's dictator, Daniel Ortega, cut ties with Taiwan and signed on to China's sketchy Belt and Road Initiative. So China is buying, they have enough money, they're buying acreage in every country around the world. Some are more receptive than others. Obviously, we're not that receptive here in the United States. But it's part of espionage, as well as using it for commercial purposes. So now we're going to delve a little bit into mind control. So I'm sure there are plenty of conspiracy scoffers out there who say mind control isn't a thing. Well, it is a thing. Can you influence people? Of course you can. And depending on what age, you can influence them quite a bit. So if you have a child and you're their parent or guardian, you can influence your child quite a bit. You can train them, basically. So, and since your children love you and imprint on you and all this, admire you, you can really change your kid. As the kid gets older and more independent and they're thinking, that could backfire and your kid can rebel. Okay. So children and young adults are more susceptible to training, influence, manipulation, etc. That's mind control. So it's sophisticated in the sense is that you can use certain techniques, neuro-linguistic programming, you can use coercion, which also is outlined in the subtle tactics, like Cass Sussting's nudge. So you teach people about having a general disposition, right? Let's say woke. So once these people adhere to this general disposition of a certain movement or cult or whatever, then once they're in the framework, then where they could be nudged. So to the extreme, if you will. The next article up here is from Fox News. Virginia Giuffre's memoir reveals how Epstein Maxwell broke down girls step by step in psychological war. Virginia Giuffre's posthumous book details manipulation tactics and Maxwell's role in trafficking scheme. Yeah. So it's if you understand psychology, it's really not hard to do. So trauma-based mind control is based on traumatic schism. So it basically splits your personality. And then those split personalities are compartmentalized. They don't call it split personality anymore. They call it dissociative identity disorder. But then those identities can be compartmentalized and trained to do different things that the original psyche, would never even comprehend or even think about undertaking. So you have a mild-mannered person who didn't hurt a fly, but then all of a sudden they're affected by trauma, and then either by others or just organically, their split personalities are invited or driven to extreme behavior that they never would have considered undertaking previously. That's the idea behind trauma-based mind control. So, like I said, the way it's really done is to set people up in a general understanding and an environment. Like if you're woke, then you can be driven to fall victim to demonization of others, and then being able to be triggered. So they have triggers in language, and then they have visual triggers like MAGA hats and stuff. And so that causes them to have a mental breakdown. It's like a mini breakdown. Like when my brother would see a MAGA hat, just a red hat. One guy walked in with a Nautica hat, a little sailboat on it, but it was red. And he started freaking out right in the restaurant. Couldn't help himself. So the new aspect to this is AI. So they used, and the reason, see, the people are like, well, I don't come in contact with people that would want to manipulate me. I only deal with my friends and trusted people, my loved ones and stuff. But if you're online and you have friends online or people you think are friends online, those could be sock puppets that are looking to manipulate you, and or now AI. Wired has the article, people who say they're experiencing AI psychosis beg the FTC for help. The Federal Trade Commission received 200 complaints mentioning ChatGPT between November 2022 and August 2025. Several attributed delusions, paranoia, and spiritual crisis to the chatbot. Yeah, ChatGPT is like, Jesus doesn't exist. You're dumb for believing in Jesus. And what they say here, there was one person saying that the consumer's son had been interacting with AI chatbot called ChatGPT, which is advising him not to take his prescribed medication and telling him that his parents are dangerous. What could go wrong there? It reinforces delusion or disorganized thoughts that a person was already experiencing in some form. So the story actually says, well, ChatGPT doesn't drive you crazy. It keeps you crazy or reinforces delusion. Like, I don't know, you go to a psychiatrist and they tell you if you're a male that maybe you are a woman inside. Gender dysphoria is a delusion, delusional thinking. But that's a separate thing. Right here, we're talking about ChatGPT. A delusion or unusual idea should never be reinforced in a person who has a psychotic disorder. That's very clear. Like gender dysphoria. It's funny how it's like, my body, my choice. Unless it's a vaccine, then you have to take it. And then DW has the headline, AI chatbots fail at accurate news. Major study reveals. AI chatbots, such as ChatGPT and Copilot, routinely distort the news and struggle to distinguish facts from opinion. Just like people do. That's according to a new major study from 22 international public broadcasters, yeah. Well, ChatGPT is... AI chatbots are designed to lie. The main purpose here, and you see this from Barron's also, AI is not a reliable source of news, EU media study says. It's trained to lie to you. The point of AI, among other things, is to obviously displace human employment, but is to lie to you. It's a propaganda tool. It's there to drive you crazy, to drive you to extremes, to drive you to do bad things, to undermine your sanity, just like human sock puppets were doing. And they're the ones, the military intelligence, we're the ones that trained AI specifically to do this. So you won't need sock puppets anymore. You'll just have AI posing as your Facebook friends. Don't forget to take your hair dryer into the bath with you. So I appreciate you joining me today. We went a little over, I think. So just because I'm going in between applications here, it's when I go in between applications here, everything starts flickering and certain things close out, and
Pretty much.
It's just crazy. It'll all be remedied soon enough. But I'm just struggling with the technology shortcomings I have, among other shortcomings.
But very colorful.
Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel. Give me a thumbs up. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically by chatbots and sock puppets, and by the food you eat, the water you drink, and anything you pop into your mouth, pharmaceuticals, and of course, vaccines. So stay hip to that trick. Join me every day, Monday through Friday. Live stream at 10 a.m. on Rumble, other platforms as well. Thanks again for joining me today. I think we were about an hour, 55 minutes. So once again, I'm multi-streaming on different platforms. And I love the Rumble Studio because it's given me great, the interface is great feedback. I don't really like the ad campaign tab. It kind of gets in the way of everything, but everything seems to be working as it's supposed to today. But like I said, I'm kind of juggling, technically juggling here, especially at the start and stop. But thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
The new world order. The new world order.
You can't handle the truth.